The last video. Are we all good? Okay, so I'm going to present making clamshell box. And hopefully everybody understands. Okay, so we've done all the math, and it's very complicated. There is a calculator. I'll give it to you. Just email me. So you never have to do this math again. But I wanted to explain at least how it works. So there's all these numbers going on with this box. But what's really important to know, and as I mentioned when we did the measurements, is we have a set of numbers that goes across and a set of numbers that goes down. Okay? That's really key, because if you try to measure each section individually, you'll never go home to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure across, turn the board, and then measure these dimensions, and then we're going to measure for the base. So we're going to start overall, measure the lid, and then measure for the base. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you make the lid and the base from the same piece of
Yes,
wood?
everything's connected.
Okay, good.
Everything
That's
is connected.
how I was envisioning it.
That's why
I was
this
like,
is
wait,
fine.
am I right?
No, you're totally right. Totally right. So we'll go with it. Okay. So we're today 9.3 and 22.9. Okay. So across 9.3, 22.9, 9.6, 22.3, and then the remainder of the board should be around 9.3. In this case, it's off by a couple of millimeters. We're gonna let it go. Sorry, people who are really precise. It'll be in the inside of your box. You won't see it. So 9.3, 22.9, 9.6, 22.3, and the remainder, just double check, looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to just draw my vertical lines down.
You're so good at measuring.
Practice, practice, you will get there. To help yourself out, because you're going to be turning this board all over the place and they look kind of symmetrical, I'm going to mark this as my lid and mark this as my base. Similar to what I did with the other box. Okay? So now that I've done this, I'm going to turn the board so the lid faces me. Okay? So I'm going to work and do the lid, and then this will get smaller as we go. So the outer dimension is 9.3. I'll do. So in this case, you could measure 9.3, 9.7. I find it easier at this point to just remember 9.3. So I'll just measure that inside. Now, these lines you draw from the top of the spine, which is here, down. Do not carry them across, because you want your box to get smaller. Otherwise, it won't close. Okay? So this is your lid. So from here, I find it easier to turn it around, but if you don't want to turn it around, you can work here, doesn't matter. But what's really important is we want this to be a thickness of board smaller than this, because we want the lid to be bigger than the base. I know I keep saying it, but it's really important. So there's a number of ways you can do it. You can either measure in, so we know we want to be a thickness of board in, so we can measure 9.6, which is 9.3 plus a thickness of board, or you can use another piece of board that's around. You can line it up, and you can draw. Either's fine, as long as you get there at the end of the day. It doesn't really matter how you get there. You just want to make sure it's a little smaller. So I'll do either. So in this case, I'm going to measure, and I just want it to be a little bit smaller than the other. In this case, I did a little line, so I'm going to eyeball it, and I'll measure in. But see, you can see from a distance, this is slightly in. If I come by and I see a straight line across, I will make you erase it because it won't work. Okay, so now we've roughed out the box. So I'll turn this towards me. The hard work is done. So now it's like before, in that we need to deal with our corners and make sure that they go in nicely. So again, if you want, you can use a scrap and you can go in the thickness of board, or you can measure. whichever is fine. I'm gonna eyeball it because you've seen it a couple times. You know what I'm talking about. You just wanna go in. A couple. We don't need our spine pieces. Okay, so we're just about there. Now, one thing I like to just make sure I draw in so that we don't forget is I want to put a thumb cut in to make my box easier to open. So again, if you have a toonie, you're not very good at freehanding, you just draw it in. I also want to make sure I have a little bit of distinction between my lid and my base, so I will do some rounded corners over here.
How exciting.
I know, thrilling. Okay, so let's start with scoring first. So I'm going to score my new lines so I don't forget. Your box will still work, it just doesn't work as nicely. So don't think it's a lost cause if you don't go in your corners. Next I'll go in to score the rest of my lines. Again, I know I've said this a couple times now. I find everything easier when you're working to draw towards you. If you try to go sideways, you won't get a straight line and you'll end up with problems. All right, so again, I'm scoring from the top of the spine down, not all the way across. We're just about ready to cut. Now, one thing I didn't draw, I tend to put this in after, but you can draw it in if you'd like. Now, remember how with the base we went in a thickness of board in order to make this box smaller. So in order to help make your box close, we need to lose a thickness of board from the outer edges of just the top and bottom of this piece of board. This we've already done the math for, so you don't have to make this smaller, it's just these sides. So by taking off a thickness of board, that will make your edge of your box down here 9.3, so that'll be the same. So you can either draw in, use a scrap of board like we've done in the past, or you can freehand it. I tend to freehand it because it's in the inside of your box, no one will see it. But that's me. Again, if you want to measure, you can measure. It's fine. This is the hardest one I have to cut. I never do it straight. I just can't, so I tend to freehand it. Great. Okay, so we've done all of our scoring. I've trimmed the sides, prepped for my other thumb cuts, rounded corners. Now it's just a matter of cutting exactly where you've drawn. And if you go and you find it easier to do erasing as you go, things are confusing, that's absolutely fine. Now, you can either cut this straight and then do a corner later. I'll just make it easy and quick for the demo.
Tori, you're liking that very much.
So much nicer than what mine's gonna look like.
I see that.
Everybody's gonna make a beautiful box. Now notice when I've cut, I didn't cut, you still have a space because again, your base is gonna be a little smaller. So it's only gonna go to this little edge and then come in. Okay, so now I've cut all my edges. Ready to go? This is the best part. And I get really excited when everybody gets to this point, and I'll probably wanna watch you, and we'll probably squeal. Just warning you. This is very fulfilling, and when you get there, it never gets old. Okay, so, I'm gonna prep all my folds. I find that this fold needs to be really squished because it helps keep your box closed. Okay? So, what you want to do is before you glue, you want to make sure that everything works.
You're so excited, aren't you?
I am every time. It doesn't get old. It doesn't. And the fact that I teach this, I'm just like, oh, it's gonna happen for all you guys. So
You'll fall in love too.
I know you will be just as rocked at the end of this. Okay, so what you're gonna do is have your base towards you. Okay, put your sides up. Hold the flap up. Okay, everybody's watching. You give your box a somersault. Put your sides together, and there you go. You have a box.
My best
Isn't that
time of
awesome?
life.
It never gets old. It's really cool. So now it's your turn.